Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today, and welcome to the webinar. Today's talk is entitled Supporting Shared Decision-Making and Communication in Breast Cancer, the ShareView project. My name is Kelsey Brown, and I am the Director of Medical Writing Solutions at TransPerfect Life Sciences in London, and I'll be moderating today's session, so great to speak with you all. Today's event will run for approximately 60 minutes, and that does include time for a Q&A session at the very end with our speakers. Session is designed to be interactive and works best when you're involved, so please feel free to submit questions by using the questions chat box in your control panel, and we'll answer your questions during the Q&A session at the end. If you do require assistance at any time, please feel free to contact me by sending me a message using your control panel. Please feel free to contact me. At this time, please note this session will be recorded and made available to you on the IDDI website for viewing within 24 hours after the webinar is complete. This event is proudly hosted by the International Drug Development Institute, IDDI. IDDI is an expert center in biostatistical and integrated e-clinical data services provider for pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies in several disease areas, including oncology and ophthalmology. IDDI optimizes the clinical development of drugs, biologics, and devices thanks to proven statistical expertise and operational excellence. Founded in 1991, IDDI is headquartered near Brussels, Belgium, with a U.S. Center of Operations in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers. So we have our first speaker, Everard Assad, Medical Director at IDDI, who some of you may know very well. And we also have Vittoria Ardito. Vittoria is a research fellow of the Government Health and Not-for-Profit Knowledge Group of SDA Bocconi School of Management, and she is also a member of the Center for Research on Health and Social Care Management, where she is involved in research projects at the national and European levels. Her research activities focus mainly on health economics and policy, health technology assessment and economic evaluations, and digital health. And currently, she is involved in projects centered around pricing and payment models of health technologies and on the implementation of learning-based artificial intelligence technologies in healthcare organizations. Vittoria holds a Bachelor's of Science in Management and a Master's of Science in International Management, both from Bocconi University. So Everardo, I'm actually going to pass it on to you if you want to take it from here.
Yes, thanks a lot, Kelsey. I hope everybody hears me well, because when Kelsey was speaking, the sound was breaking a little bit. So I don't know if this was something related to her or to me, to my sound settings. So, but I hope everybody can hear me well and then can hear Vittoria as well. So it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to yet another IDDI webinar. And before I pass the ball to Vittoria, I just wanted to tell everyone how we got to this point, how we got to know her. And this was through our collaboration with Dr. Oriana Ciani, who's a long-term friend of IDDI and has even participated in previous webinars. She's an expert in health economics and HTA, and more generally in evidentiary assessment in healthcare. And so we had this joint idea for this project that Vittoria will describe, which was very important for them and for us as well, because it was one of the ways in which we further developed this method that Vittoria will talk about. And I just wanted to tell viewers that the method that's called GPC is a statistical method. Today, the focus is not on the method itself. It's not a statistical webinar, but for those of you who are really interested, we have some webinars on our webpage that you can easily find at iddi.com. And we have quite a few webinars on the topic, various aspects. And so please feel free to have a look if you want to go a bit deeper into the meaning and how the method works. So Vittoria today will talk about this project, which entailed decision making in healthcare, in particular shared decision making between patients and healthcare providers, and this is a great topic and a very important one. So welcome, Vittoria. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Everardo, and thank you, Kelsey, also for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen as soon as I have the okay. All right. Can you confirm that you can see my slide?
Yes, we can see your slides.
All right. Okay, oops. All right. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, and as anticipated today, the topic is shared decision making as part of this project that's called ShareView, the ShareView project. That is a project that was run since September 2021 until December 2022. That's called supporting shared decision making and communication in breast cancer care. Thank you for the introduction also about myself, about my background. Just maybe a few words about myself before going into the project itself. My name is Vittoria Ardito, and after a few years in management consulting firm, I decided to switch back to academia, actually back to Bocconi, which is where I completed both my Master of Science and my bachelor's studies. And I'm currently a research fellow at the Bocconi School of Management in the division of government health and not-for-profit of the school. And I'm also affiliated with CHERGAS, which is our research center in health and social care management. For those who might not know CHERGAS, this is a fairly large group of researchers that do research on healthcare and social care management. And it's actually up to 70 people working in the center, in the research center, and we work both with projects on national backgrounds, but also on international projects, international grants, Horizon projects, and we are proud today to tell you about this international collaboration at the European level, and I will give you also an overview of the partners of this project, which was a true European project. And the CHERGAS does research in several areas, from healthcare management to HTA and economic simulations, but also global health policy, and more broadly, healthcare management at large. And as anticipated before, my research interests currently focus on innovation in the life science at large, and specifically on drug pricing and digital health. I am part of the HTA and Economic Evaluation Division of CHERGAS, and so I am involved in several projects in the field of health economics and more broadly on health policy. So as anticipated today, let's switch to the focus of today's webinar, which is shared decision making. You might have heard about shared decision making because it's a topic of growing interest in the past years, and especially in the area of breast cancer. And this is because breast cancer is increasingly being considered a chronic disease for many patients that have to live with cancer throughout their life. And therefore, it is important to actually account for their values, for their preferences, for all the cases where basically there are several treatment courses available for them. And therefore, it is actually important to account for their views, for their preferences, for their values. And actually, there are several studies that demonstrate that shared decision-making is actually important because it is associated with less regret about the treatment decision that has been taken, and also that favors aid coping and treatment compliance throughout the treatment course of the patient. So it's actually a very important aspect of of breast cancer care that of course contributes to having towards what is called patient-centered care, and for this reason it is also a concept that is increasingly included in clinical guidelines in different countries, and therefore that's why we believe it's very important to talk about this topic and to raise awareness on the importance of shared decision making. Specifically today, we are talking about patient decision aids, which are basically tools that enables shared decision making, because there are tools that facilitate shared decision making by promoting patients' engagement through visual tools, evidence-based information, guidance, coaching in a structured way. These are tools that are typically used by the patients with the healthcare professionals together or individually, and that are meant to basically supplement, not replace, the role of the clinicians. So they're basically tools that can come in different formats, either paper-based or digital tools, or also any kind of facilitators to the communication, also coaching sessions and interactions with other professionals that serve as a way to basically reduce the information asymmetries between patients and professionals in a given area, such breast cancer. So this is actually the focus of today. We are specifically assessing patient decision aids in a twofold way. But before going into details about what we did in the ShareView project, focused on shared decision making and decision aids in breast cancer, I just wanted to, as anticipated, to give you a very quick overview of the partners that were involved in this initiative, in this research initiative. The project was coordinated by us, by Bocconi University, under the lead of Oriana Ciani, and we are based in Italy. And then there was, of course, IDDI, that led by Mark Boyce, but also Everardo. That we would like to thank again for the opportunity to have this webinar today. And then there were two healthcare institutions, one based in Lisbon, in Portugal, under the lead of Dr. Fatima Cardoso, and the second one based in Italy, in Udine, under the lead of Dr. Giampiero Fasola. And then there was also a cross-project support by Europa Donna Italia, that is a patient association in breast cancer. And so these were, like, as you can see, it's a European project, but also multidisciplinary project, because there was an academic institution, a biostatistician institution, and there were healthcare centers, and then patient association. Just to clarify, my presentation is going to be structured in two main sections. In the first part, I'm going to present the results of a cross-sectional, cross-country survey that we ran at the European level to investigate the adoption of shared decision-making practices and the use of decision aids in the breast cancer, amongst breast cancer professionals. And then in the second part, I'm going to present the results of the pilot testing activity, where we basically investigated the feasibility, acceptability, also usability and potential for shared decision making of a tool that was developed by IDDI and that can be used to support treatment decision in breast cancer care. So let's start with the first section. The survey was it was a very interesting survey that we developed after conducting an extensive literature review on decision aids in breast cancer care. As I said, this survey targeted breast cancer professionals, and therefore to make sure that the survey was well understood in different contexts, or also by clinicians with different backgrounds and nationalities, we also pre-tested and validated the survey with the clinicians from different nationalities. And of course, we also received the approval from Bocconi Ethical Committee about the survey itself. Distributing the survey was quite challenging because we wanted to reach breast cancer professionals in European countries, and therefore we relied on breast cancer networks, either international breast cancer networks like EUSOMA or BCN, breast centers networks, but also national networks like Unicancer in France, Seno Network in Italy, or the German German breast group in Germany. So it was challenging because, of course, like clinicians receive a lot of requests similar to ours, and so we had to sort of send reminders and come back to them, trying to reach a sample for our survey as large as possible. And I'm going to present you the results in a second, but just to give you let's say an overview of how the survey was structured. It was structured in 3 sections. One focused on communication style and shared decision making. One focused on patient decision aids, and the third was focused on demographics. This slide actually sort of provides a visual representation of the survey structure. The first section, as I said, was focused on communication style, communication model, decision-making process, and then specifically shared decision-making. The second section was focused on patient decision aids, including barriers and facilitators for their adoption, and then, of course, some demographic questions. And based on how the survey respondents actually replied to the questions, we were able to identify 3 different types of respondents. So either users, so those who actually have some type of decision aids tools in their institutions and use them in the routine practice. Those who don't have these kind of tools in the hospital or in the healthcare centers where they work, and they don't use it, and so these are non-users. And then the potential users are those who actually don't have these tools in their organization, but said to be willing to use such tools should this tool become available in the future. So it was important to make this premise here, because throughout the next slides, I'm going to talk about users, non-users, and potential users. So hopefully it will help you follow the next few slides. So overall, we were able to collect valid responses from 198 participants. Participants were mostly female. Over 60% of the respondents were female, with an average seniority of 19 years of practice, basically. Of course, we managed to actually reach a lot of European countries, but not with the same representativeness throughout different countries. Of course, Italy was the country with the highest representativeness, because we were able also to reach to our personal network and to disseminate the survey more easily. But apart from Italy, also Germany, France, the UK, and Portugal were the countries where most answers were collected. In terms of role of the respondents, most of the respondents were medical oncologists and surgeons that together made up to 70% of the survey respondents. And this is actually very good for us because we wanted to reach out to doctors that have a patient-facing role, that actually have conversation and discuss with the patients. Other relevant roles that we reached were actually also radiation oncologists, radiologists, and then some nurses, psycho-oncologists, and palliativists. And then another information that might be relevant is also the type of breast unit that these professionals worked on. And actually, almost 80% of the respondents were from certified breast units, either at the European level or national level. So this should be a sort of a proxy for the quality of care that is delivered throughout these breast units, and also the attention to innovation in healthcare delivery, like using this kind of tools. So it's in line with our expectations. Moving on to the second section, which was communication style. I'll try to go fairly quickly on this one, but it's important to notice that, first of all, we basically wanted to understand the communication style, the communication approach that clinicians perceive to have with their patients. And we used, I'm looking at the left-hand side of the slide, we used some models defined by Charles and colleagues, the paternalistic model, the some sharing information only model, informed and shared. Just a quick description of each of the models. So in the paternalistic communication approach, basically the doctor communicates to their patients the treatment course that they decided individually or with the multidisciplinary tumor board, and the patient receives this recommendation without basically any additional information. In the second approach, the some sharing information only approach, basically the doctor communicates to the patients also maybe pros and cons of alternative treatment options, but then of course it's the doctor who makes the final recommendation. In the third approach, the informed approach, the doctors communicate pros and cons of every viable treatment course to the patients and let them decide on their own which one to pursue. And last but not least, in the shared approach, basically the patient, the doctor presents to the patients any pros and cons of different treatment options that are available to the patients, discuss with them their preferences, ask their value, and then together they decide on which treatment to implement. And it's interesting to notice that at least in the perception of the doctors, 85% of the respondents found this final approach, the shared approach, as very or extremely comfortable in using this kind of approach. And it's important because it's, of course, sort of a factor needed to sort of implement a shared decision-making approach. We also asked about factors relevant in the decision-making process, not shared decision-making process, but more broadly in a decision-making moment. We asked which factors are important for them, and I would say over 90% of the respondents found very important or extremely important the first four factors, which were discussing pros and cons of the treatments options with the patients, or providing the patients with the clinical information, agreeing on a treatment option together with the patient, and of course receiving from the patients information on what is important for them. And again, we were surprised by these results, which were fairly promising and encouraging in a context of shared decision making. And this is the final slides on communication, on this section on communication style, which is specifically on shared decision making. And we also basically asked respondents whether they agree or disagreed with some statements focused on shared decision making. And again, over 85% of the respondents said that they somewhat agreed or strongly agreed with the fact that shared decision making is important to improve patient satisfaction, mental health, and quality of life. But it also requires appropriate training for the healthcare professionals in order for the shared decision making to be actually implemented and pursued, and that also patient association can actually have a crucial role in favoring the shared decision making by involving patients or disseminating evidence-based materials, and also that in general organizational support from either the top management of an healthcare organization or from peer clinicians is somewhat important to implement shared decision making. So of course this was the first section and was quite promising in showing that at least in the perceptions of the clinicians, shared decision making is auspicable in a sense. Then this other section was specifically focused on patient decision aids. And so we basically tried to investigate the adoption of these tools in the institutions where the respondents currently work. And so we asked if any patient decision aid is available to support treatment decisions in their practice. And 55% said that yes, some patient decision aids are indeed available. And then we asked, okay, but do you use such tools to facilitate treatment decisions? And 86% of the respondents who said that these tools are available believe that they use, in fact, these tools in practice. Then we try to understand a little bit better, to dig into these respondents and ask what kind of tools are available. And I would say the vast majority, 77%, said that of the respondents said that they basically use paper-based tools. Then there are also in descending order question prompt lists, coaching sessions, and digital tools are or interactive web-based tool. Only 24% of the respondents use them. And then there are also option grids, basically structured tables that illustrate pros and cons of different treatment options, videos, and other tools. Quickly, we also investigated when these tools are used in the clinical practice and how often these tools are used. And interestingly, you can see that apart from the coaching sessions that are also frequently used after the clinical consultation, the majority of the tools, from paper-based tools to conversation aids to web-based tools, option grids, are used during the consultation. So in a sort of interactive approach with the clinicians and the patients. And we also wanted to understand basically how frequently these tools are used, and we used an ideal sample of 10 patients as a proxy for usage frequency. And so we asked with a sample of 10 patients, how often do you actually employ these tools? And it's interesting to notice that the paper-based tools are used most likely with a larger group of patients, compared to the digital tools or web-based tools that are still a little bit more, let's say, scarce and used with fewer patients, basically. We also investigated the barriers, the perceived barriers. So the reasons for not using these tools when available. And so those who could use but decide not to use these tools in their organization, they said it's because they prefer other strategies at large. So some said that they actually prefer to make some drawings on a piece of paper to sort of explain pros and cons. So it's a very broad category that basically explains that clinicians maybe don't use these tools because they just use unstructured, let's say uncodified approaches to clarify the clinical content of their conversation with the patients. Others just mentioned patient characteristics. Maybe they believe the health literacy or the age of their patients is sort of a barrier for using this tool. But also the lack of an organized system to distribute decision aids is also a factor that is perceived as a barrier by most of the respondents. And last but not least, also lack of proper training about how to use these tools in the daily practice. Moving back to those who instead don't have any tool available in their organization to support shared decision making and to support the conversation with the patients, we asked, okay, but if these tools were available in an hypothetical scenario, would you be willing to use them when you interact with your patients? And again, these numbers are quite promising, because 85% said that they would use these tools. We then asked which factors would be relevant for them to use these tools, and the most important factor was basically being developed with evidence-based information, with scientific information. And this is an important point that we will also come back to later when we discuss the focus group. And then, finally, those who would not use these tools, even if they were available, we asked what were the perceived barriers. And these are more or less the same perceived barriers that we saw before for the users. So I will skip to the next slide. This is an important finding that we are quite proud to present you today, because up until now, the results that I showed you were on the whole sample of respondents. Then we rerun the analysis by gender and also by professional role to understand if there were some significant differences based on the gender of treating physician and also based on their professional role. And interestingly, we didn't find any significant differences based on the role, but we did find some significant differences, statistically significant differences based on gender. On average, for almost all of the items, female respondents actually perceive these factors related to decision making and to shared decision making as more relevant for them compared to the male professionals. And there were some statistically significant differences for some items, like, for instance, the need to receive basically information from their patients about what's important for them, also on the need to actively engage caregivers, patient family members in the decision moment, and also on the need to provide patients with these decision aids that we have been discussing today, like leaflets, brochure, videos, or any kind of decision aids, actually, in order to engage them in their health decisions. So these factors were considered more relevant by female clinicians, and this difference was statistically significant. And although we are aware that the numbers of our survey are relatively limited, we believe these findings add on a quite promising stream of literature that analyzes basically how the gender of treating physician can impact on patient outcomes. There are a lot of studies that actually demonstrate that the gender of treating physician have an impact on patient outcomes, and that gender concordance might be relevant in having gender concordance between, of course, clinicians and patients might lead to higher patient outcomes. However, to date, there aren't that many studies that actually clarify why this might be the case, why gender concordance might lead to better or higher patient outcomes, and more broadly, why the gender treating physicians might play a role. And in this perspective, our findings could contribute to clarify the differences of patient outcomes based on the gender of treating physicians, maybe because female professionals are more prone to listen to the patients, to understand their preferences, their values, to engage their caregivers or family members, or to spend some more time to engage them in their health decisions with this kind of decision aids. So of course, it's a little step forward, but we believe these findings are fairly relevant. Some final takeaways from the survey. So for sure, there's the survey shows a quite strong interest in shared decision making based on the perception of the clinicians in breast cancer care that we surveyed at the European level. It seems that availability of this decision aids tool in the healthcare organization translates into actual use. And interestingly, also interactive web-based tools, which seem quite spread in the literature, are not that currently, available in practice, because paper-based tools are those that seem still today the most used, at least based on the results of this survey. And of course, all in all, there's the need to clarify the factors that influence a sustainable adoption in clinical settings, including the mention to gender differences. I will now switch to the second section of the survey, which is the pilot testing of this tool developed by DDI. I will go quickly through the description of the tool, and then maybe if you have detailed questions on the tool itself, we can take these questions in the hand, also with the support of Everardo. The tool that we tested in the healthcare institutions that were part of the project in Lisbon and in Italy, in Udine, is the net treatment benefit tool that for the purpose of this study was intended as a web-based decision aid to support shared decision making in metastatic breast cancer care. And as anticipated in the introduction, the tool allows to conduct the GPC analysis, so statistical analysis that actually allow to prioritize patient outcomes based on the preferences of the patients. This is a tool that runs based on trial data, and in this case we use the Pearl randomized clinical trial database that basically collected the data on 2 different treatment courses: endocrine-based therapy versus chemotherapy in breast cancer. So the tool in this piloting effort was intended to be to simulate basically a conversation with the clinician who guides the patients with the tool navigation. And of course, before running the pilot, the cancer professionals involved in the focus group were received a formal training on the tool, on the rationale, and on its procedures, of course, in order for the simulation with the patient representatives to be as real as possible. I just wanted to show you the interface of the tool. of this web-based tool that allowed basically to order what you can see here: overall survival, quality of life, safety, are basically outcomes that were measured as part of the PEARL trial. And basically, the tool allows to order these endpoints based on the individual preferences of the patients. And based on these preferences, the tool gives back an output that basically, based on the expressed order of preferences, sort of indicates which is the treatment option that is more in line, let's say, with the ranking, with the endpoints according to the expressed ranking. The focus group, like we ran 2 separate focus groups, as I said, one in Lisbon in the Champalimau Foundation and one in Udine, in a university hospital in Udine. It was important to have 2 separate focus groups because they were run in Italian and in Portuguese, and also to test the tool in 2 different organizational settings. Of course, there was a private hospital versus a public hospital, and also specialized breast unit versus general oncology department in Italy. What we did was basically bringing into around the table clinicians and patient representatives and simulate, let's say, a session of a session between patients and between patient representatives and clinicians with the tool. And the focus group basically was structured with the semi-structured questions and validated questionnaires to assess the feasibility, the acceptability, and the usability of the instrument. And just for those who might not be familiar with these terms, feasibility basically means understanding if it's feasible to integrate a certain tool, to implement it in a clinical context. Acceptability sort of assesses if for the user it is acceptable to use the tool, so it assesses its adequacy in terms of possibility to satisfy a certain need or a certain requirement. And then usability basically investigates the satisfaction, the user satisfaction when using the tool, for instance, the interface. Just an overview of the results. We believe, first of all, the pilot testing was important to understand the potential of the tool to enable shared decision making, and 4 patterns emerged. So first of all, not only clinicians, I would say especially patient representatives, believe the tool is important to enhance and foster patient centrality, because of course, especially the patient representatives believed this tool could actually favor engaging them with the decision, reducing the information asymmetries, and putting the patient at the center of the decision. Of course, the tool was perceived as a facilitator for the interaction, although I would say at first clinicians were a little bit skeptical about the tool, and this sort of clarified that it's important to have a formal training about a tool before actually being able to use them. Time management is also important because, of course, I would say the tool could save some time, but could also let's say, lead to longer consultations with the clinicians. So there were mixed feelings on this point, I would say. But time management is for sure a factor to keep in mind, and also patient coaching, because the tool was very important to coach the patients regarding the possible also, the endpoints, and so about the possible adverse events that were associated to the treatment being proposed to them. Feasibility as a second area of patterns that emerged. So the tool was overall perceived as feasible. So it was perceived that pretty feasible to integrate this tool in the context. Of course, some adjustments in the care pathway was needed. Because of course it's important to understand when to use, exactly when to use this tool with the patient, if introduce the tool by the nurses or directly by the clinicians during the consultation. Again, as I said already, some training was needed because of course the tool was full with at quite some statistical contents that the clinicians were not confident with, and so there was this point that was discussed quite a lot, especially in Udine. The clinicians said that too much statistical information could have an undesired effect of scaring the patients away, because it might be seen as some information that the doctors are not confident with. And so of course it's important to properly train the clinicians, and also to redesign the interface, the patient interface, with fewer statistical information. And of course, integrating the tool with the hospital existing technology was also deemed very important. It might seem obvious, but not every hospital necessarily have a strong Wi-Fi connection, and the tool necessarily needs a Wi-Fi connection in order for it to be run, and therefore it was pointed out that in order for tools like this one to be then used in the daily practice, integration with the existing infrastructure was of course key. Also, for instance, it was discussed whether it's better to use it to display the tool with a tablet that can be handed over to the patient, or with the computer that is sort of more static. So we also discussed actually this kind of technicalities. This was actually the purpose of the focus group. Also, now moving on to the third area, which is acceptability. So basically, whether the tool was able to address a need and satisfy a need. Of course, this area somehow overlaps with the previous ones, but in general, the tool was perceived as useful. As an useful support. The visual layout needed some sort of improvements, I would say, in order for the tool to be properly acceptable. And also applicability was quite discussed, because the surgeons found this tool more applicable in a real life context more than the medical oncologists, possibly due to the alternative surgical options compared to the treatment options available. And last but not least, usability. So therefore, this fourth area is more focused on basically the visual interface and the layout. In this case, also there were several areas of improvement suggested in the focus group. And of course, first of all, the display of images and text was discussed, that needed to be less statistical, as I said, and also fewer information. Length of the messages, maybe better to have shorter messages and less technical than long, let's say, difficult information. And then intelligibility related to the former 2 points. So I'm probably running out of time, so I just transition to the conclusive remarks to leave some time for the questions. all in all, these conclusive remarks are both on the survey and the focus groups. We observed a vigorous interest for shared decision making and decision aids in breast cancer care in Europe. And as we said, interestingly, availability of these tools seems to then translate into actual use, but this is mostly refers to paper-based tool, possibly quite basic information, leaflet information, packages, not actually more advanced, interactive, web-based modules that are still only possibly tested in the literature and illustrated in the literature, but not used. And regarding the main findings from the focus groups, patient views of shared decision-making tools are highly valuable, and remark their willingness to be actively involved in treatment-related decisions. And therefore, this sort of clarifies that these kind of tools are possibly to be well accepted by the patients, and therefore needs to be further investigated. So sorry for being a little bit long in my speech. These are my contacts, and I would say if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Vittoria. And thanks everyone for listening. And that was an excellent presentation, Vittoria. And I'm sure we have lots of questions for you as well that we'd like to go over before we end today's session. So everyone, just a quick reminder in the audience, you can still submit questions in your chat panel. You can submit those and then we can read those either during the Q&A session, or if we don't get to them, then we'll chase up after the call. So.
All right. Thanks, Kelsey. Thank you, Vittoria, for this very nice presentation. And just once again, on behalf of IDDI, we wanted to thank you, Oriana, and I know Natalia also worked a lot, and everybody else that was involved in this project. Thank you very much. You were perfect on time, so we have time for a few questions. First, I'll ask my own question while I wait for questions from the audience. Do you all already have any kind of follow-up plan? Let's say where do we go from here?
Yeah, this is actually a question that we received also during the focus groups. Of course, the tool at the moment, and you can say this better than I do, is under development. So it's I would say not ready to be used in a clinical context, because of course the first factor is being able to feed the tool with data. And this was actually, I didn't say throughout the presentation, but one of, let's say, the most critical part or time-consuming part was accessing the trial data in order for the tool to be run. Ideally, the more the data, the better, because of course the tool could also allow for to perform a sort of meta-analysis between different trial data that have the same outcomes, the same endpoints, and this would allow to sort of generalize even more the results, and therefore making it even more solid, more strong to be used in a clinical context. So I would say the next steps are getting the data. This is not necessarily easy, not necessarily doable. I mean, it's not plug and play. So I would say, but given the enthusiasm that the clinicians showed, I would say for sure the next steps will be sort of continuing to raising awareness on the need to have shared decision making, and to have tools like yours, like the net treatment benefit, supporting this kind of communication styles and approach in order to foster what is called patient-centered care and to improve the quality of care. So
okay, right, thank you, and thanks for pointing out that that's a very, very important message. Let's say for whoever's viewing this, what we're calling tool here is the interface of this statistical engine, let's say, that's running behind with clinical trial data. And this is really under development. This is really a, let's say, a preliminary view of this. And it's supposed to be in the future something that can be used by different types of stakeholders. And we don't see patients as, you know, let's say the next in line. We have to develop the tool for many types of stakeholders, including clinicians, regulators, and of course patients. And so, but we see this as a, let's say, step-by-step process, and probably, like you said, for patients we need to improve many aspects of the interface in terms of you know, how it's understood and used. And also you pointed out another important aspect, which is actually the bottleneck of all this initiative in terms of having something that can be publicly used, is the availability of data. As you know, and many people attending this webinar may know, despite all the efforts towards data sharing, this is still something very difficult, and we struggle to get data, and hopefully this will improve more and more in the future. But for us, this is a key component of our efforts, but not only for us, it's something of worldwide importance, and you know, more and more we hope that data from clinical trials will be made available so it can be used for different types of research, including the type that we are doing. So let me ask you a question that came to us. There is often a contrast between the perceptions of developers of new technologies and those of the actual adopters. How did the physicians react at first when you illustrated the tool? I guess it's when you show them the tool. By the way, were you there physically, or were you guys not present?
I was there only in the one run in Italy, because the one in Lisbon was in Portuguese, and I'm not able to speak Portuguese, but
right.
Natalia, we believed it was very important to run the focus groups in the native language of the participants, because of course it was easier for them to express and to contribute to the discussion. So I can reply for the focus group run in Italy. And I would say at first the clinicians were very skeptical. I believe this is fairly common for clinicians when you sort of step into their areas of expertise. And so first of all, they were very skeptical about the possibility to have these two alternative courses, so endocrine-based and chemotherapy, for the same patients. They were like, okay, but this is not true for every patient. Okay, but this tool can be used only for a relatively small subgroup of patients. And also they were also, some of them knew the underlying trial data, and so they were a bit skeptical about, you know, the underlying data and the underlying evidence on which the tool was built. So they were not sure that basically the outcome of the tool could be generalizable to patients from their local context, basically. So at first they were a bit skeptical, and also because probably they didn't get the purpose of the activity of the initiative was to not to validate the tool in order for them to be then plugged into the routine practice right after, but just to get their feedback, their perspective on its possible use. So it was, of course, it was not a validation exercise, but sort of an improvement exercise. And once they got that, and once they familiarized with the tool better, they became more open. At the end, they were actually very excited about the tool, so their attitude completely changed throughout that 2-hour meeting that we had with them. And so at the end, they were very, you know, excited, and they wanted to know more. They wanted to know the next steps. So it's also important how these kind of interventions are presented and explained to the users, to the adopters.
Okay, I think we have time for one quick question, which segues with this one that you just with your answer now, so the question is, what elements did the focus group participants value the most about the tool as possible facilitators for the tool uptake? I think, yeah, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, maybe some of the facilitators, I mentioned them already when presenting the evidence of the focus group. But well, I would say dependency. I would say interoperability with hospital systems. I would say training, clinician training in order to ensure a proper use, and I would say sort of need to reason on the care pathway that needed some adjustments in order for the tool to be properly integrated in the pathway, in what was the traditional consultation with the patients, in order to have a smooth integration of the tool throughout the patient visits, I would say.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. We're right on the hour. So Kelsey, I guess it's back to you.
Great. Thank you both so much, and thank you for everyone in our audience for attending. If you have any questions that you weren't able to send in today, or you'd like to send in after, you can direct those to the email on your screen, or you can send them over to info@iddi.com. That's info@iddi.com. As a note, you will be receiving a follow-up email from us with access to the recorded archive for this event. And just one final thank you to Vittoria and Everardo. Thank you very much for leading today's presentation. And it's been my pleasure to be your moderator. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thanks, Vittoria.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.